All right. So to give you the big picture, we left for Berlin on May 12th, Tuesday, May 12th, and we joined up with John Sapia, whom many of you know. He is the director of our missions work here in our district, here in Southeast, Alliance Southeast, and also with Adam Weichert, who is a young man at our Naples Alliance Church. We then traveled by train to the city of Varennes, and we spent the next 8 days with our missionaries in that city and within some of the other cities that we'll tell you about. And you see the area we're really focusing on, which was northeast Germany. And you see that highlighted in black. To set the stage, northeast Germany, listen to this. Northeast Germany is considered the most unreached area of the world, given its density, the population density. Fascinating. Northeast Germany, the most resistant to the gospel. So we ask why? Why is that? Why would this area be so resistant to the gospel? Well, there's a number of reasons, and we want to lay them out for you. First of all, the church. It's the state church. And by that, we're talking about church in name only. People go there, it's very few. There's not many that attend, and when they go, there's no gospel. It's all ritual, ceremony. So there's a resistance there. The church just isn't what it should be. And the state, listen to this, the state of Germany takes a tax on people, 10% of their wages, and gives it to the state church. So it's not very well appreciated by the people. So you can understand if you're coming as the church, there's a resistance right there. So in addition to that, during the war, World War II, during the Nazi regime, clergy were often spies who turned people in to the Nazi regime. So again, just some of the picture of the church. Germany's church, name only. So another part of this, speaking of the Nazis, the missions team thought it would be important for Margie and me to visit one of the concentration camps. And we're very glad that they had one of their team members accompany us as we visited Ravensbrück. Quite an experience, utterly horrifying. It was just a terrible place, and it will be etched in our memory forever. And one of the aspects of the camp that we found that was so very despicable was the behavior of the women guards. Ravensbrück was a women's concentration camp, and the women guards were utterly, from what we read and saw, were utterly detestable. I mean, it was just amazing to see. Let me give you the background for this about the women being guards. In Germany, even to this day, a stand-up shower is a luxury. But these guards, these women guards that were at Ravensbrück, when you looked at their barracks, they had stand-up showers.
There was a row of these homes, 8 of them, for the women guards. You can go to the next slide, an individual one. As far as we can tell, they had all the amenities that you would want at that time.
Yeah, in addition, they were given a good pay. They had a good financial benefit. They were seen as honored in the society as they were part of the SS auxiliary. And it was fascinating to learn that these women guards would take bets as to how long it would take a new woman guard to become statistically evil. It was just incredible how evil these women were. We saw pictures of women grabbing babies out of mothers' arms, taking the babies and putting them in the gas chamber. It was utterly despicable. One other aspect, when Hitler finally took charge of the government and he was elected by the people, he came in as a freedom fighter. When he came in, almost immediately, the 96 other legislators who were elected by the people strangely disappeared. They just weren't anymore. They were either murdered, or they didn't appear anymore, or they ended up in a concentration camp. And
Let me stop right there. There are 96 slabs there in that memorial, one for each of those men who went missing or were killed. Many of them, like the very first one, actually, he had been sent to Ravensbrück. There were some men there as well, but it says on each slab who it was and where they were and how they died.
yeah, it was just quite a moment to see. And if you've ever heard of people saying that the concentration camps and the atrocities of the Nazis did not take place, think of this. Today in Germany, it is required that every high school student visit a concentration camp. They are required. Why? Because Germany is saying we never want this to happen again. And that's a good thing. And to that point, there are memorials. They have memorials, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But when we went to the concentration camp and we were seeing different pictures, one of the people that we saw, you see it up there on the screen, is Corrie ten Boom. Now, most of you probably know who she is. She was a vibrant Christian as she came out of the concentration camp. Her story is written up in a book called The Hiding Place, and I would encourage you, if you've not read the book, to read it. She and her sister were both in Ravensbrück. Her sister died in Ravensbrück and was a meaningful mentor to Corrie during the time that they were in that ugly place.
Actually, we learned Corrie was released, just let go, and she learned later that it was a mistake. They had not intended to let her go, but somehow the paperwork happened, and out she went. And I would add there, we learned from being at the museum there, they had meticulous records. Some of them were destroyed before the camp was liberated, but they had specific detailed records about every person, when they came in, how they died, everything.
I mentioned just a moment ago the issue of the markers, the memorials, so that this would never happen again. One of the things that Margie and I saw frequently as we walked through Berlin, northeast Germany, was these little square markers that you see on the sidewalk. Those markers, where each one was different, each one called out the name, inscribed the name of a Jewish person who had been taken and murdered at the concentration camp. And
they lived at that residence, and so that marker was there. And our understanding is they're all over Germany.
Yeah. Another indication of the resistance to the gospel is what's called the Kristallnacht. The Kristallnacht means the night of broken glass, and that occurred on November 9th, 1938, when the Gestapo Nazis went into Jewish homes and businesses and just broke everything, destroyed everything in their homes and in their businesses. So again, still talking about why the gospel is so dismissed. Even after World War II, Germany was divided among 4 different countries: the United States, UK, France, and Russia. But the Russians in particular took over northeast Germany, And with their socialist thinking and their communist background, they absolutely annihilated any kind of faith. Faith was just not able to be expressed. Now, Berlin, being the capital of Germany, was divided in the same way, east and west. And people were allowed to go back and forth from the eastern side of Berlin to the western side of Berlin up until 1961. And that's when the Russians put a fence up, which later became the Berlin Wall.
Our guide told us that one weekend, a barbed wire fence went up around all of East Germany, just that fast. No warning, no anything. It just went up. And from that day on, you could not cross without, approval.
And you may remember the phrase Checkpoint Charlie. Checkpoint Charlie was one of the gates that people would have used to be able to go from the eastern side to the western side. And the Russians simply put the wall up because they didn't want East Germans to defect to the west. It was just another element of the suppression of the freedom of the people. So you'll see next, I think, yeah, you see the picture of the wall there. Now what you're seeing, they don't keep the wall up, but they have the stone on the ground to show you where the wall had been.
All the way around the city.
Yeah.
You see that line in the
Yeah.
pavement.
Yeah.
And actually, we should point out, there were two walls. You can see the wall on the left, and there was another wall. And if you ended up in between those two, I think you were shot on the spot. There were two walls to keep folks in and out.
Another element of German culture that we found and saw is the fact that German folk do not invite people into their home. That's just not part of their culture. It's kind of a wrong thing to do. So what they end up doing is they rent a yard and they have people come to their yard and they'll have time together that way. Don't understand why, but now what they're talking about here is the lack of love, communication, lack of wanting to connect with people. It's really hard to understand for us here in the United States. And with all this in mind, as soon as the wall came down in 1989, the Christian and Missionary Alliance began targeting Germany to reach them for the gospel. They knew that the Germans desperately needed to have the Lord Jesus Christ in their hearts. And we were continually praying to be able to, we, the Alliance, were praying to be able to breach that gap, to be able to work into people's lives. And one of the strategies that they employed was to create an English Christian camp not far from the city of Waren. So let us introduce you to the missionaries that we were privileged to be with. And I would encourage you to be praying for each and every one of these people. They're very precious to us. The first is Ben and Sarah Carey. Ben and Sarah began their ministry in Berlin 20 years ago. And as we've already mentioned, the heart of the international workers, the IWs, the missionaries, was to reach Northeast Germany. So 12 years ago, the Careys began their ministry in Waren. Waren, the city of Waren, was strategically chosen for a number of reasons. First of all, it was central to the Northeast, that section that it was so unreached. Secondly, it was on one of the main train lines. And thirdly, it was near the English camp that had been established. So Sarah and Ben began their ministry by trying to build relationships. We can't emphasize that enough. They began with nobody. So what do you do? Well, Sarah went to the same hairdresser all the time. Ben went to the same coffee shop all the time. They went to the same grocery store. Why? Because they knew that as they went and met people, they could begin to build relationships. So they, in addition to all that, they were there and told people that they could teach English. They could do cooking classes
That was at the community center.
at the community center. So these were things that were very, very, very important for the Germans in their culture. Are we need a new one? Okay, all right. So again, you could see the strategy that they were involved in. They would, at this English camp, they would start on Friday evenings, they had youth meetings.
I was going to say, from the English camp that had already been established, that means once a week, it's a week long. But they had contacts from that, and some of the folks were from Barn. So then, yeah.
So what they were doing was really conveying to the Germans that they were authentically, genuinely concerned about the people. They loved the people. They loved the children. They loved the adults, and they wanted the people. Is this on? Okay, just seemed like it was a little off. Okay, now we're on. Okay. So the genuineness, the relationship building that they were involved in. So prior to 2019, the Careys would invite these contacts to a meal at their small apartment and share scripture. In 2019, of course, there was the severe COVID restrictions. But in 2021, they started to meet in the community center because they had already developed good relationships there. But even here, the space became too small. So they had to look for a new place to meet. And the Lord provided that space that they have now. And we're going to show you pictures of that in just a few moments. In February 2022, when the Ukraine war started, this small group of Christians began to work with the ones that came in, the refugees, and they met with these 4 families that came. And when we say families, what we're talking about is women and children, because the men couldn't come. If they came, they couldn't go back to their country, and there could be other consequences.
Even now, the men are not there yet. They're not allowed to come. So these women have been raising their children by themselves in a foreign country for the last four years.
We mentioned just a little bit ago that the culture in Germany was such that you don't invite people into your home. Well, of course, our missionaries, Ben and Carrie, were going to do exactly the opposite. They were going to bring people into their home, and they did. But they found very quickly that their little home wasn't big enough.
They had a tiny apartment. There were the Careys and 4 children. I don't know how they did it, but then to have everybody come.
Yeah. So Sarah began to pray, Lord, we need a home. We need a bigger place. We need a home. And she found
With a dining room. Her specific prayer was, we need a home with a dining room.
Well, she found one on eBay, and she looked at it, and she was telling Ben about it.
This is the home
That they're now in.
that we're now in.
Yeah.
Now you can go ahead.
Yeah. So Sarah said, let's look at this home. And Ben said, this is ridiculous. The Alliance isn't going to buy a home. They're not going to do that.
We don't do that. The
Yeah.
Alliance doesn't do that.
So Sarah said, well, just go with me and look at it. So they went and they looked at the home. They talked with the owners of the home. And they realized when they talked to the home, the owners, who were atheists, said, well, we already have a buyer. He's already willing to put down $50,000. Well, Sarah and Ben weren't in that category yet. So Sarah went back and talked to the Alliance and told our denomination the situation. And the Alliance people came back to Ben and Sarah, and they said, well, ask the owners if they would accept $20,000 now, and then $30,000 later and allow us to pay the remainder over time. That versus a guy that's willing to give you money right out the bat. Well, they went back to the owners and they offered that as a solution. And guess what? The owners said yes. The owners, the atheists, said, you know, we would rather have a family with children in this home than a single individual we don't know what would happen with. And so they also told Ben and Sarah, and you know what? We're not going to charge you any interest. All the money that you give will go to the principal. So again, glory to God. And the interesting thing too is Sarah still meets with the lady. And when there's a tragedy or there's a hardship, the lady contacts Sarah and she gets to pray.
Connor, would you go back one? I want you ladies to see this. Obviously, there's dining room space, lots of dining room, and you can't see it real close. But ladies, all those dishes are pottery. And Sarah chose to do just all different. So every plate, every cup, they're all different, even the serving pieces. Another girl you'll meet, Susie, she chose to make it all the same plates and cups and then all different serving dishes. But the neat thing was what they shared is the ladies make it a special ladies' day. Actually, it's now turned into an overnight, and they go to Poland, and they close. They go and are able to get all the pottery pieces, and it's just a wonderful time for them. And they bring back the pottery that they want. But I wanted you to see the pottery.
Connor, if you'd bring up slide 26, we want to again show you the building in the back of the home, their main home. This was originally created by the atheist owners as a place for their parents. And then as part of the deal, that became part of Sarah and Ben's place as they're renting. But it was in a state of total disrepair. And what happened was there was a water break, and the insurance company, the money that the insurance company gave them, Sarah and Ben were able to totally redo that back building. And now that building too is a residence. Margie and I and John and Adam, we all stayed in that building. So again, to the glory of God.
It's used in numerous ways. They have interns come regularly, sometimes for a year, several months, and so they can use that for that as well. So it's just a marvelous blessing for the ministry in a whole.
Yeah, and so please pray for the atheist owners of this facility and just hold them in prayer and that Sarah and Ben would be able to reach them for Christ. And if you'd pull up 27, you'd pull up the slide 27, what we wanted to point out, the yard between the front house and this back house is a wonderful place as well for folks to gather and for the children to have fun.
And they use that with the church a lot. You know, there's a whole grill and covered area with the picnic tables. They can use it a lot for the church.
So we want to just mention that at present, the Alliance still owes about $60,000 on this property. And if God would put it on your heart to help pay for that, you can give to that the designation, and we can write it out and give it to you later. But if you send the money to the Alliance, you want to designate it as the Waren, Germany Ministry Base. That's the Waren, Germany Ministry Base, and that would help them clear that. And now, if they once they pay that $60,000 and fully own, then the housing allowance, which is now being used to pay that principal, can be used for ministry purposes again. The house is important also in as much as Germany, in the German law, you are required to keep your papers, your financial papers, your legal records. You have to keep a record for 10 years. And so the Careys are able to keep their stuff in that house. Plus, it also gives them space to keep some of the material they need to do their ministry. It's just a very great place. They have stuff that they use for camps, and they're able to keep them in that back house in the attic or in the basement. Well, as this ministry grew, even this property that we just spoke about, that you've just seen, became too small for meeting on Sunday mornings. Hallelujah. So as the Lord led them, they moved to a community center that's now it was a larger facility, and they were able to occupy this on Sunday mornings. The location is very expensive where they're meeting, but a church here in the United States has agreed to provide the rent for the next 5 years. So we're grateful for that. So the church has been named the International Gemeinde Waren. That's slides 28 and 28A. It's an international community in Waren. That's the name of the church. And when we attended this church service on Sunday a few weeks ago, it was so exciting to see. There were about 40 people there. They were gathered, they were worshiping. It was just a delight. And it was so exciting to see maybe about 10 children were in the ministry as well. It was just a delight. And folks, that's a product of 12 years of dedicated work on the part of Ben and Sarah Carey. So the emphasis, we talked about this some, but the emphasis on the children's ministry is something the state church cares little about. So the Careys were just pouring their lives into the children, and it was thrilling to see, as we were in this service on Sunday, the ministry the children were receiving. Providing the space for the children has had a profound effect on the adults as they were worshiping the Lord.
The German young families that come in are utterly amazed. This you can go to the next one, Connor. This area that you see, they had a little nursery room plus the youth room, and the Germans are just astounded that they're paying extra to have this room to minister to their children. They're just flabbergasted that that's happening.
Yeah. So the space that we're now referring to, not their home, but this larger space, it enables them to minister to the children, have the worship service, and then after the worship service, they're able to convert into a meeting place to have a meal right after church.
Yeah, we need to stop there. I don't have a slide. I can't believe I didn't get it. But if you turned around and looked in the opposite direction, it's like a big hallway, a wide hallway. And they have taken that and lined the whole one wall with just white cabinets. They have dishes, serving plates, everything you need there. And then on the other wall, there's actually a sink and a dishwasher. So everything happens and they can still have their meal. The meal is so important that they always invite people, come meet with us and have a meal. But that space was absolutely astounding.
Yeah, my wife was just heartbroken that she didn't take a picture of dishes. It's just, whatever. But anyway, it is a wonderful facility where they're meeting, and it was just really thrilling to see both the setup for the meal and the takedown after the meal. You see these people being involved in the church ministry. It was very, very special.
Because it wasn't always that way. This is rather new, where folks are really taking ownership, helping get the food out in the morning and then helping clean up. It's a major step forward. It really is.
Well, we talked to you about the ministry of Sarah and Ben. I want to talk to you now about another couple another group of a couple of missionaries that we worked with while we were there, and these were discipled by Ben and Sarah as well. We spoke earlier about the English Christian camp. One German young person, her name is Salome, was 13 at the time that this English camp was going on, and Sarah was working there. And Sarah brought Salome to Christ, and then she discipled her. So Salome not only learned English, and in fact, she learned English so well that when we first met her, we thought she was American.
I even asked her, well, what other English did you get? Thinking, English camp wasn't going to do it. She said, no, really, it was English camp and meeting with Sarah. I was floored.
Her name is Salome, and she has become a very committed believer. And she married a German Christian man by the name of Tommy Scharf, Scharf. And as you see there in the picture, the two of them are just happily married. They have two wonderful children. It's just precious, David and Joshua. So again, please pray for Tommy and Salome. We know that God is working in their heart in an incredible way. Tommy, who is an architect by trade, is working in the Alliance Lead program to become an Alliance pastor. And we are trusting, the missionaries there as well are trusting that Tommy and Salome would take over the ministry there in Varan, and Sarah and Ben would move on to another area and begin to disciple others, which they've been doing. But pray for Salome and Tommy, because as they would step into this work, they would need more income, and they would need to be bivocational. So pray for Salome and Tommy in the work that they're about to do. The city of Varan is seen, as we've said, as a hub for the missionaries, reaching the northeastern part of Germany. So let us introduce you to another couple. And what we're talking about here is a couple that was sent to Rostock, a city in the northernmost part of northeast Germany, just below the Baltic Sea. This city was chosen because it was one of the largest cities in the area with 500,000 people. And then also it contains the largest university, and it also has two large hospitals. It's on a main train line. And this couple that went there, you see in the picture, Kenny and Carissa Young, and their three children, Oliver, Alyssa, and Madeline. And this family is just working there. They've been mentored by Ben and Sarah, and they're doing the same thing in Rostock. So I want to move again to a third couple that we want to introduce you to, missionaries of Sean and Susie McLean. Yeah, they too are being ministered and discipled by Ben and Sarah, and they're part of the ministry with Ben and Sarah right now, but they're going to be going on home assignment beginning June 20, not too long from now. But what was fascinating when we met Sean, he picked us up at the train station. He had a car, got out of the car, and he looks at us and he says, "I know you." Really? Yeah. And it turns out that Sean and our youngest son, Aaron, were very good friends at the church I pastored in Mendham, New Jersey, back in 1989. Just blew us away.
I mean, he's 6 foot tall.
Yeah, no, he's more than that.
Looking at him, we didn't recognize him. As soon as he said his name, we knew who he was.
Yeah. Well, the McLeans arrived in Germany in 2022, just before, one month before the Ukraine war. And so they were instrumental in helping Sarah and Ben and others in ministering to the Ukraine refugees. Sean's ministry in Varin at the church that we showed you a little bit ago is he's the head of worship, and he's also the youth leader, and he participates that way. So, as I mentioned, they are going on a home assignment on June 20. So we're asking you to pray for them. They are going to be involved. They're going to Butler, Pennsylvania, which is a place that's close to Susie's family. So we'd ask you to pray for the kids because they're going to be involved in the states, in the schools in the states. Pray for Sarah because she's going to be on the home front. And of course, pray for Sean as he goes about speaking across the country, telling folks what's been going on in Northeast Germany. And speaking of the children, one of the ministry points that Margie and I really saw for the first time, we'd never seen before, was an issue dealing with the ministry of missionaries' children. It was fascinating to see that the missionaries that we visited with had their children, for the most part, they had them with them. They were either in a school very close to where the missionaries were ministering, or there was one that was in the Black Forest Academy, which is a little further away. But what we heard, it never occurred to me before as a pastor, is so often the children are put in a school that is far away from where the mom and dad are. And that's in no way to disparage the schools that we have, like the Black Forest Academy. They're excellent schools. But what we found was for some of the children, not being able to be with mom and dad in their formative years had an impact on their lives. And Ben and Sarah were talking about that, not directly, but just talking to us about like their one daughter, Leah, and how they were, needing to minister to her, to have her there with them. So I just, again, would ask you to pray in general for missionaries and their children and how they relate to one another.
We thank you, My Grace, for doing the insert, but we did give you the names of the children and their ages or where they are in school and that kind of thing. So you have them to.
Yeah. Another aspect of our time there we have to share with you. We, in the second half of our time in Germany, we were doing some traveling around other parts of Germany and still in Berlin, but then in some other parts. So we had a driver and we had a guide who was pointing out different elements of Germany to us. One of the drivers was named Jem, G-E-M, Jem. And we'd ask you to pray for him. Jem came years before to Germany. He has a background from Turkey, and he is a Muslim. And as he's driving us around, he's talking to us about his search for God. So we had opportunity to share the gospel with Jem. And one of the strategies that we used was My Grace's mother. We told Jem the story of My Grace's mother, how she too, we said, we know another lady who also was searching for God. And she prayed and asked God, who are you? Show me who you are. And she said, Jesus spoke into her life and said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I don't know how much later, but she read that in the scriptures and she said, yeah, I know who he is. So we shared that with Jem, and Jem told us, I'm going to go home tonight and I'm going to ask God who he is. So please be praying. Please be.
I think we have enough time. Real quickly, he is a Muslim. Part of the background was when the war ended, there were no German men. Either they had been killed or they were taken to Russia as prisoners. There weren't men. So you have all this rubble all over everywhere, and all you have is women and children. A real quick note, Berlin, was it Berlin? No, it was Frankfurt. 80% of it was destroyed in 2 days. Kessel, where we went, in 90 minutes, 60% of the city was annihilated. It was a bombing raid. In 90 minutes, it was wiped out. So there was all this rubble. So after the war, the Germans went to Turkey and some of the neighboring countries and said, hey, if you guys want to come over and help us, you can stay 5 years and then go back. Well, they came and they helped, but they've never gone back. So actually, I don't know if it's true in the little hamlets, but in most any city, the population is 25% Muslim to this day, and more. Some of the cities, it's a lot more.
Well, we're winding down, but we did want to share this with you. I mentioned the second half of our time in Germany, we were pretty much on our own, and that was because my wife's background is German, and her ancestors were from Kassel, Germany. So all of our married life, we've talked about, we're going to go one day, we're going to go to Kassel, and we're going to see where some of her ancestors are. And I know she can tell this story better than I, but we were looking particularly for the home of her cousin Anna. And will you tell about during the war?
Real fast. My grandma worked at a hospital and had ladies under her, and the boys were going off to war. And my grandma gave these boys something, the name, address, I don't know what. But she said, if you find this lady, you let me know. Well, sure enough, one of those boys came back and gave grandma the information. So all during the war, grandma and cousin Anna communicated. Grandma sent them coffee and chocolate. And then after the war, every year, between Christmas and New Year's, our family would get a box about the size of this right here. And it was German cookies, and in the middle was a Hummel. Every year that would come until my grandma died. And so that was why Kessel was so important. And just for our family, we all love the German cookies, and I looked all over, but they're seasonal there just as they are here, so I couldn't bring any home.
So anyway, with that background, knowing that Kessel was so very important to us, and knowing that we had heard on our tour that 60% of Kessel was destroyed in a bombing run during World War
90 minutes.
In 90 minutes, I just found this, and it just blew me away. I've got to read this to you. This story is confirmed in Elmer Bendiner's book, The Fall of Fortresses. Elmer Bendiner was a navigator in a B-17 during World War II. He tells the story of World War II bombing, a bombing run over Kassel, Germany, and the unexpected result of a direct hit on their gas tanks. He writes, our B-17, the Tondaleo, was barraged by flak from Nazi anti-aircraft guns. That was not unusual. But on this particular occasion, our gas tanks were hit. Later, as I reflected on the miracle of a 20-millimeter shell piercing the fuel tank without torching off an explosion, our pilot, Bon Fox, told me it was not quite that simple. On the morning following the raid, Bon had gone down to ask our crew chief for that shell as a souvenir of this unbelievable luck. The crew chief told Bon that not just one shell, but 11 had been found in the gas tanks. 11 unexploded shells, where only one was sufficient to blast us out of the sky. It was as if the seas had been parted for us. A near miracle, I thought. Even after 35 years, the awesome event still leaves me shaken, especially after I heard the rest of the story from Bon. He was told that the shells had been sent to the armorers to be looked at and examined. The armorers told him that intelligence had picked them up. They could not say why at the time, but Bon eventually sought out the answer. Apparently, when the armorers opened each of those shells, they found no explosive charge. They were as clean as a whistle and just as harmless. Empty? Not all of them. One contained a carefully rolled piece of paper, and on it was a scrawl in the language of Czech. The intelligence people scoured our base for a man who could read Czech. Eventually, they found one to decipher the note. It set us marveling. Translated, the note read, "This is all we can do for you now. Using Jewish slave labor is never a good idea." So, praise God, praise God. We're done. But as Margie and I close, we have to say, what?
Tell them about finding your cousin's house.
Oh,
We did in fact get to find my cousin's house. That was we having a hard time following any ancestry or anything, but we did in fact get to find her house and go see it. And the man on the first floor was an antique store, but he's only been there 30 years, and she died in 1980, so he didn't know her. But he let us go in and see in the back, like the stairways she would have used and that kind of thing. So it was very precious. Lord willing, it's going to be very precious to take it back to my two brothers and be able to show them that, just because it's been so special.
as we close, our hearts were really radically touched, as perhaps you can tell from our time here. We were just really taken by their dedication, by the difficulties through which they work. And we would just encourage you, as the Lord would lead, that maybe you could go and visit at one of our mission stations across the world. But we would certainly ask you to be praying for all of our missionaries. And as the Lord leads, let the Lord lead you. But if the Lord puts it on your heart, that you might be able to help them financially as well. We know that God is in control. It's His Spirit that leads. But the Lord is doing a marvelous, marvelous work through our missionaries.
And too, one more thing I would add. You can pray for the German people, because as we shared all of this, they bear a burden of what's happened, and to be able to find freedom in that and to come to know the Lord, and it is a dichotomy, that they deal with, because yes, there is the past, but they also want to be able to move forward. So
Thank you very much. God bless you.